Welcome to another edition of the Leader-Post Rider Rumblings podcast. This is episode 171. I am Taylor Shire. He is Darrell Davis from the Leader-Post sports staff, and we're talking about the Saskatchewan Roughriders' second straight victory. They closed out a win 21-18 over the Edmonton Elks on Friday. The score was 21-18, Darrell, and as you wrote about this week, as we both kind of chatted about after the game, a lot closer than it probably should have been.
Yeah, when you said closed out, I kind of chuckled, Taylor. That's kind of what they've had trouble doing, isn't it? Their last two games in particular, and even earlier this season, the Roughriders have dominated games, but let their opponents back in, and it gets kind of scary because they're often a play away from losing a game. They did make some big plays down the stretch, a couple of big sacks, 2 of their 8 sacks against the Edmonton Elks for their last win, but I don't know what's the deal with this football team. Why can't they just put the boots to somebody and then walk away afterwards and say, boy, we sure won that one easily, didn't we?
Yeah, I don't know if it's, you see that lead, you feel it, and you say, okay, we can let off a little bit, stay healthy for next week. There's a bunch of different psyche things that go into that. And then the other team is obviously trying a little bit harder at that time to get back into the game. And that's just the mentality of anybody, right? When that happens.
How about the play calling? What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I was just going to say before that, I kind of think about it in baseball terms. The closer comes in, he loads the bases. Oh, no. And then he gets a strikeout to end the game. And that's kind of what that game reminded me of. Yep. They let 2 touchdowns in to make it a 1-score game. And then all of a sudden the defense steps up with a couple of big sacks. So yeah, they had the bases loaded. Edmonton was sort of pressing for that walk-off winning grand slam. Or I guess it would have been tying if they would have kicked the field goal, but they were pressing to tie the game all of a sudden, and then the closer comes in and throws a couple of strikeouts to end the game. So that's So it's cause for concern, but they ultimately did get the job done. So do they need to learn how to close out a game? Sure, but they probably are still capable of doing it. It's just a matter of doing it, I think.
Right. Because they're basically the class of the West right now. The Roughriders are in first place after Calgary lost to Montreal, and the teams that they've just barely beaten, the BC Lions and Edmonton Elks, are near the bottom of the barrel, right? So the Elks are kind of in shambles. It's unfortunate. Cody Fajardo started for them, the ex-Rough Rider quarterback, who's easy to sack quite often, evidently, and they're not using Trey Ford, who everybody had high hopes for as a quarterback and hasn't played very well. But the Elks are not only deficient in offense, defense, but also special teams. They've got to learn their way a little bit, and the Rough Riders should have put them away a lot easier. But as we always say, right, a win's a win's a win. So they got that 6th win, and they're looking pretty solid heading into as they start the second third of their season.
Yeah, I thought Cody Fajardo in his return to Mosaic, and I wrote about that after the game, it was probably the longest awaited return ever to Mosaic Stadium for a former player. It was so weird how the schedule played out, but he finally made his return. Didn't get booed off the field or anything. I thought he had
more, by the way. That's a curious one. Were you expecting there to be some more reaction to Cody Fajardo being there?
Yes, I was.
I was too.
I was expecting not necessarily a tribute. I don't know. It was so long ago.
Well, they played a tribute to him when he was with Montreal, right? And he did come back.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, right. He was. Yeah, he didn't start that game, but they sort of said, "Hey, thank you, Cody, for your couple of years." I wasn't necessarily expecting that, but I don't know. I don't know what I was expecting, but there was not a lot of fanfare. I was expecting more fanfare than what there was, whether that's booing, cheering, whatever it might be, or some sort of salute to the crowd type of thing. But like I said, it's been so long. So the fact that he's starting, I guess, is the only note to that. He's already made a return here. He's been on the sidelines and whatnot. So,
yeah. And he's won a Grey Cup since then.
Yeah, it's been so long. So it's not like it's top of mind, but it was just like we made it a big deal. Oh, it was his first start against his former team.
It's not like the old Henry Burris days, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then there were some questions prior to the game about, will he be treated like Henry Burris in the old days and whatnot with the Henry chants, and we didn't hear any Cody chants. So I don't know if I was expecting that, but we definitely didn't get that. I still think Fajardo had a good game, even though he was running for his life most of the night. I don't think that offensive line in front of him did a lot of, or helped him a lot. Saskatchewan's defensive line had their obviously best game of the season with 8 sacks or 6 sacks and 2 from the linebackers. But I still thought Cody played better than Trey Ford would have in that situation.
Yeah, probably. I agree with you. Whoever's behind that offensive line is going to be in big trouble at the moment, right? They have one good player at left tackle, and the rest of that team needs to be pieced together. They don't piece them together like the Roughriders do with their offensive line. Hey, another pretty good performance with another change on the offensive line starting group. So and one sack, which was kind of a good sack. It was late in the game when Trevor Harris was rolling out and running, and he realized, you know what, I can't run out of bounds here. I can't throw a pass. So he basically took the sack to keep the clock running to help it expire in the fourth quarter. So that was the only sack the Riders' offensive line gave up, which is really impressive considering another change, right?
Yeah, and I wrote about that, but credit to Jeremy O'Day and Kyle Carson and all of the staff for just finding these players from down south, from across U Sports. Like they went and got Noah Zare a couple of years ago. And now he's all of a sudden having to start, right, after being cut this year. Yes. So the fact that they're able to get these guys ready, and I think, you can credit the scouting staff, but also the coaching staff, Edwin Harrison and those guys, to have these guys ready in practice and to make this line cohesive. Like, nobody obviously knew who Peyton Collins was or Darius Washington, and they're two, I would say they've had two good performances at left tackle. Daniel Johnson has been sort of waiting in the wings. I don't think anybody tapped him to be a starter. So they've gone through three left tackles, and all three have had good performances. And I don't think a lot of teams could say they have three left tackles that are quality starting or left tackles in the Canadian Football League, American or Canadian players, right?
You're right. Plus, they've started three left guards. Mm-hmm. They've started two right guards. Jamarcus Hardrick at right tackles started every game, and Logan Ferland at center has started every game, but he wants to play guard. He would prefer playing guard to center, but has filled in there. So really impressive. Edwin Harrison, I know we joked about it, and Corey Mace told us we just call him Coach of the Year, and we see that, right? The job he's done with that group to get them prepared under tough circumstances, really, really impressive.
I think the 8 sacks was impressive, but I think maybe the most impressive stat from the Riders' defense especially was they only allowed 5 rushing yards to the 2 running backs. Fajardo had 20 yards as he scrambled out of the pocket several times, but 5 rushing yards to the 2 running backs. And this comes after Saskatchewan lost last year when it was Javon Leake ran for 100 and some yards against this defense with a few new faces, but a few returning faces. But last year, Edmonton came to Mosaic and absolutely ran over the Riders. So what are they going to do this time around? Well, they're going to stop the run and put a heavy emphasis on that and make Fajardo and the Elks one-dimensional. And that's really what they did. And I think that, to me, sure, they sat the sexy stats and they had 8, but I think the rushing yards, and they made the Elks one-dimensional, allowed all of the rest of that game to carry out like it did.
Yeah, like what did Micah Johnson tell you afterwards? That we stopped the run. That's our bread and butter, right? Yep. And that's what they did. They did a great job after. So, good for them. We've been waiting all year, right? I know we talk a lot about the 9-man rotation, but it's still basically that front 4, which is a good front 4. We expected. They all have all-star credentials, right? But they hadn't been dominant. And I kept, in my report card, I kept saying, we haven't seen a real all-star performance from any of them. I don't. Not that they take that to heart or anything, but all of a sudden they all seem to step forward and play their best game at the same time. And you're right, that front 7 was great. That defensive line was really strong. The rotation seemed to help and just spell those guys a little bit to keep them fresh, because they got those sacks right at the end of the game, when that's the toughest time to sack a quarterback, probably, because you're a big tired defensive lineman. So yes, that's the best performance from the defensive line. And it's kind of one that we were expecting from them, wasn't it? They, not that they had let everybody down, but they hadn't been that dominant group that we were expecting, had they been.
Mm-hmm. And even in terms of rushing yards, they've let a couple of running backs go for over 100 yards this season. And that wasn't the case last year. How many times did they keep a running back or a team to under 50 yards rushing in an entire game? That was sort of the case last year, game in and game out. A couple new pieces in Shane Ray and Mike Rose this year in terms of the starting 4 anyway. A lot of depth players have remained. But I think this defensive line, how they played on Friday, was as good as they've played not only this year but last year as well. And I think that's maybe what they're more capable of. And those rushing stats anyway might.
True enough. Yeah. The front 7 was really good. They stopped the run. They made them pass, which is what the plan is on this defense, right? However, the secondary didn't have its best game either, right? There were a couple of guys who, Tavon Campbell was nowhere near a receiver at one time. Jamarcus Fields was nowhere near. Nelson Lacumbo got beaten for one. Even Roland Milligan Jr. got jumped over top of for a pass. So they all kind of gave up a big play somewhere, it seemed like, which isn't what we've really been expecting or seeing from the defensive backs, is it?
Yeah, and Fajardo had almost 400 yards, 300 and some yards. So when you take away the run and you make it one-dimensional, you basically force Edmonton to throw the ball, and that's what they had to do. And you can say they gave up a few big plays, but Edmonton has some talented receivers. Fajardo made some good throws, so you're going to get beat once in a while. But if you make them one-dimensional, I think you take away half of what their offense is, so you force them into that throwing situation, you're going to get beat. That's what it is. You're never going to shut out a team. You're never going to have 0 yards. You're never going to let any, you're never going to be, 0 net yards and 0 points. A defense is never going to hold a team to that in pro football, or at least they shouldn't. So I think you can have a few busts. You are allowed a few busts, but when you fix those mental mistakes and maybe you don't let them go over the top of you, but you can let them make that catch in front of you if you're out of position. And
although they let them get behind them a little bit, and no interceptions, which to me is rare too. Right?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. If you let a few big plays, you need to then take the ball away or force. Maybe the 8 sacks was sort of the in turn of in exchange for the lack of interceptions, the 8 sacks I think helped to that, because Micah Johnson did say afterwards the defensive backs were a big reason why they got so many sacks, because of their tight coverage. It allowed Fajardo to scramble out of the pocket and try to find a receiver, couldn't, and then he was down.
Okay.
So
that makes sense in that part of the argument. You're right. They're mostly sacks are usually caused, or half the time caused, because of good coverage in the back end. So okay, we'll give them credit for that. But it seemed like there were a couple of busts, and there always will be. But
exactly,
that's where they wanted it. But they did it. They won, and you're right. Very impressive the way they stopped the run, because the Elks, that's how they were going to have a chance against the Rough Riders, was to run the football, and they were shut down completely.
Yeah. But I still, again, going back to your point, I don't think there's room in a defense to let in a 57-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter. You can give up that 30-yard pass if you have to, but don't let him get behind you, right? That's a mental mistake, bust in coverage, however you want to write about it. That shouldn't happen, especially when the game is that far out of reach. If you want to let off a little bit and let them have that cushion, then obviously you want to knock down the ball or intercept it, but don't let him get behind you. That's sort of the number one rule, even in hockey, right? A hockey metaphor. If you're up 3-1, don't let them get a breakaway. You can let them maybe get a 2-on-1 or a 2-on-2, maybe an odd man.
Make sure you get 3 guys back. Right?
Exactly, right? Don't let them. Yeah, exactly. Don't let them get back into the game by your mental mistakes.
Yeah, you don't need to score, but you do need to stop them from scoring.
Yeah.
Right. So, that's a good point. And they didn't do that, which is usually, and to me, that was the surprising part, Taylor, because they've been so good at that, right? They play that deep zone and they don't let people get behind them.
Yep.
This game, for whatever reason, they let some people get behind them, especially in the fourth quarter. They were outscored 14-0 in the fourth quarter, and that's what made Trevor Harris so mad, the quarterback, that they had 5 straight 2-and-outs. They had 1 or 2 first downs in the fourth quarter, and you can't do that. You got to keep grinding it, and you got to get some big plays. Maybe they got conservative. Maybe they just didn't take enough chances, or maybe I don't know, like you were talking about, maybe they just got a little mentally lax in that end of the game. But they'll work on it. I have no doubt. Winning cures a lot of ills, doesn't it?
Yeah, if that ended up being a loss, there would have been obviously a lot of the storylines would be a lot different. But yeah, sure, they can't close it out. But yeah, again, going to the offense, Trevor Harris, they started slow too.
Yes, they did again, which they've done a few times as well, right?
Yeah.
But they're really strong in the middle of the game. Yeah.
So great second quarter, great third quarter, shutout in the fourth quarter. So the offense, I think, but I don't know what it is. Like I can sort of tell you or what I think about how the defense is, but I don't know how the offense gets shut out like that. Can't sustain any drives. Is that a credit to Edmonton's defense for shutting them down and trying to get back into the game? Are they just sort of letting off the gas a little bit and saying, well, we've got this wrapped up. We've scored enough points. Now we're just going to, play conservatively in terms of not putting our foot down type of thing. I don't think the play calling was an issue. I don't think any of that. You talked about, was it Tommy Stevens last week going in and trying to do that package to close out the game? It had worked previously, and it didn't really work last week. They didn't really try that again. So I don't know what the offensive issue was.
Yeah, they just got stymied. I think maybe a little bit of complacency, right? And they lost Sam Emelis by then, their key receiver, who had a tremendous game. That's a serious injury for the Roughriders if they lose him. They tried to run it with AJ Ouellette a little bit. He did break one for a first down, but otherwise they were stopped. That's the most important time to run the football in the Canadian Football League is in the fourth quarter when you have a lead. You have to run out the time. You have to keep possession of the football. And considering how well they've done running the football in certain games, I was expecting more from them in that part, and they weren't able to do it. Maybe we should give some credit to Edmonton at that stage that the Elks turned it on. Maybe the Roughriders were a little bit tired because they had been up and down the field a few times and had been, the time of possession was pretty equal. So maybe it was just sometimes those things happen, and they didn't. I was surprised they didn't try to go back to that Tommy Stevens. Put him in, but it didn't work very well the time before against BC. So they need a strategy that's going to keep driving what Trevor Harris say, driving the nail into the coffin, right? So we'll see what they do going forward if they get the lead again. It's going to be a little tougher this week in Montreal, though, isn't it?
Yeah, and I was going to say Stevens was stuffed on the 2-yard line as they went
that's
for
rare.
it. So he didn't get in. But AJ Ouellette had his best run late in the fourth quarter. I think that run for the first down helped close out the game. And Joe Couch, I think, deserves a bit of credit for that punt.
Yeah.
And even Fajardo said after the game, their punter had a great punt on his final one, pinned us deep. That's a tough spot to start.
The 5-yard line with 24 seconds left or something. Yeah, what a great punt. Joe Couch had maybe his best game too. He
had just missed one out of bounds just prior, so I think that sort of was a bit of redemption for him.
Right at the 5-yard line. What a beautiful punt that was, and they really needed that one right then. So if you're going to do that at the time, that was the strength of the kicking game. Brett Lawther missed another one though. 2 for 3. That's 67%. The joke up in the press box, we were saying we talk a lot about Trevor Harris completing 70% of his passes. Meanwhile, the kicker's making fewer than 70% of his field goals. How often does that happen that the passer is more accurate than the kicker? And you and I have talked a lot about Brett Lawther. We both like him. We both respect him, his integrity and his efforts, and he's had a wonderful career. What is it? Still a worrisome point?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay, you're hanging in there, right?
Not yet.
Okay.
I think it would disrupt the locker room at this point, and that's.
You think he's that popular that it really means a lot that they show that they've got support for him, hey?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's the biggest thing. I think that's why there's no competition yet. I think that's why he still has a job, because they still have faith in him, and it would disrupt the locker room. And they're a first place 6-1 team. They don't. He's not losing them games. Sure that he had one really bad game, and he hasn't been amazing this year, but. They're still in contention. I think he still has the ability to put together a good second half of the season. And I think, again, I wrote about it, but I think it would just disrupt the locker room too much, in my opinion.
He is
one of the longest serving riders, so it makes a difference. You're right. And why tip over a ship that's kind of sailing along on a pretty good path? Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, if they were 1-6, sure, we can say here's a scapegoat and this, that, and the other, but I don't think that's the case. And speaking about this week, the Riders have to go into Montreal now and play the Alouettes before their second bye week of the season next week. But a couple of weeks ago, we might have looked at this game. Okay, this is a potential Grey Cup preview. Montreal has been playing well. They're off to a 5-2 start. The Riders are obviously playing well, but Montreal has no Davis Alexander at quarterback, who's injured. He's the guy that replaced Fajardo as the starter there. So McLeod Bethel-Thompson will come in. He's still a proven quarterback, Bethel-Thompson, and I think he's still capable of winning games. I mean, you saw them just beat Calgary, right? So that, to me, says... In Calgary. Well, yeah, so that to me says, okay, Montreal is better than Calgary. Calgary just beat Saskatchewan. So where does that put Montreal and Saskatchewan? We're going to find out this week, although the teams could look different come playoff time. But I think it'll be a good measuring stick game this week. Yeah, I agree with you. Because of that defense, Montreal's defense is Noel Thorpe, the defensive coordinator, has always put together an outstanding defense. I believe it's second in the league in most of the stats to Calgary's great defense, and that's what helped pull it out. McLeod Bethel-Thompson, the quarterback, is okay. You're right. He's won a Grey Cup, so he should be able to do it. I know he doesn't take criticism very well. Obviously, he was throwing some mud back at the TSN guys who weren't ready to get criticized for their criticism, but that was kind of funny. And he's known for doing that. McLeod Bethel-Thompson last year was criticizing the schedule too. So
let him. I love that. We always kind of say, "Oh, what are you saying?" But it's fun from the media point of view to have a guy like that's outspoken, and he's been around long enough. He's earned his privileges to say things like that. So good for him. And he did look better. He's fitting into that offense better and better as it goes along because he's a smart guy. He's an experienced guy. Davis Alexander was a real key for that team. Had really sparked them, and that's who they were looking to lead them. Losing him has changed the look of that offense quite a bit, but it's still obviously lethal enough to beat Calgary, which isn't easy to do against that defense. And the Alouettes defense is really going to be tough for the Roughriders.
Yeah, especially on the road. So that, to me, I think Montreal's offense can sustain enough. And Bethel Thompson is a good passing quarterback, and going against this zone defense, he very well could pick it apart. I don't necessarily think he will. I think it'll be I think it'll be a defensive battle. I think this will be a bit of a lower scoring game. The Riders obviously have to head out on the road. Montreal has been a tough place to play for not only this team over the years, but for everybody. So. Although there's no air horns apparently anymore in Montreal, it'll make the broadcast a little bit easier to watch this time around. But still true. A tough place to play.
It always is, and we always laugh about the Montreal nightlife, but the players don't do the nightlife thing anymore. It's not like the old days when they would head out on Crescent Street all night. They charter in a day and a half before and charter out right afterwards, so they're just resting. It is tough to play. It's a small place. It's humid down in Montreal. The crowd is right on top of it. It's usually got a big crowd, and the Alouettes are a good football team at the moment. They're right among the leaders in the East. So, is it a Grey Cup preview? Well, it still could be, couldn't it? Although Hamilton looks pretty strong in the East right now, but the Roughriders sit atop the West. And remember, the Eastern teams, didn't they just come off a week where they beat all three Western in the East-West games? The Eastern teams won all three of them. So we'll see if that trend continues when the Roughriders visit Montreal on Saturday.
It should be a good game. Darrell, thanks as always for joining the podcast. That does it for episode 171.
See you later.